Scott, can somebody else do Final Fantasy 17? Let's talk about it.
Oh, that's a dangerous question.
Younger creators could lead Final Fantasy 17. Producers suggest. Andy Robertson over at VGC. This is an interesting article when I was reading through it. It says here, speaking to Sony's Shuhei Yoshida in an Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences interview, Yoshida was asked if he would be directing Final Fantasy 17. What? Quote,
Yoshida doesn't do that, though.
No. I'm on the board of directors now, so I really need to watch what I say here, end quote. He replied, quote, for the moment, I'll just say that nothing's been decided yet. That said, if I had to say anything about that, I've had the chance to work on 2 of these games, which is interesting, right, to say the least. So there you go. He's got some background into this, so maybe it's time for someone new, you know. Instead of having the same old guys handle the next game, I think in some ways, it would be good to look to the future and bring in a younger generation with more youthful sensibilities to make a new Final Fantasy with challenges that suit today's world, end quote. Yoshida was then asked what advice he would give a younger director working on Final Fantasy 17. Quote, well, basically, and this is the same for the father of the series, Sakaguchi, and Katiz, who's currently brand manager of the Final Fantasy series, Final Fantasy is about challenging what's been done before, end quote, he said. Quote, man, there's a lot of quotes. Scott, we got a drinking game going on today. And while I'm certainly not looking to pick a fight with the older games, we all make Final Fantasy games thinking, mine will be the most fun, end quote. Quote, so my advice is to just dive in and first put down on paper what you believe will be the most enjoyable Final Fantasy before thinking too hard about it. Then, from there, you can decide things like, since 15 was real-time action, no, 16 was real-time action, my Final Fantasy is going to have both real-time combat and turn-based battles. Or, you could go to the other extreme and return to the series' fully turn-based pixel art roots. End quote. Wow. But, you just have to sit down and think about what you're going to spend years of your life on. What experience would you want your players to have, and what is it you want fans to be playing? End quote. Scott, we also know that Final Fantasy 16's had its DLC out. One of the DLC so far. The other one's coming later in the year for PS5. Interesting little conversation here, Scott.
I have to imagine you're going to jump back in when those DLCs drop, because 16 was a pretty monumental game for you, from what I recall. But the idea of a next generation working on Final Fantasy, it's sort of an inevitability, right? Final Fantasy has lasted 30 years. I might get some angry reaction to that. Maybe it's 35 years, but in any case, it's a super long respected series. So I kind of understand. I think what I'm getting out of this text is that it's kind of hard to make something brand new and creative strike out in a new direction when everybody kind of has their opinions about Final Fantasy already. You get something like Final Fantasy 15 that comes out and people really don't like it. And I think people really didn't like it because it dared to be different.
Which is fair.
I'm not certain what the best direction is for Final Fantasy, but only that I know they will endure, they will continue, and these games are either going to get a little bit weird or they're going to get too samey forever. And I'm of the opinion we need to get a little weird, but I'm also a fan of 15, so that kind of puts me in the minority.
You're already weird. So 16.
I like Crystal Chronicles. What do I know?
16 was on our Game of the Year discussion, so you should take a look for that one. I think that'll be going up on our YouTube channel, if not on our website sooner than later. So that'll be there. It's already going up on our fastest channels and stuff like that. But it's one of those. Final Fantasy 16 was a pivotal game for me last year, and one that really kind of resonated with me that I never expected from a Final Fantasy game. I'm not the biggest Final Fantasy. I honestly went back to 10. 10 was really where I kind of got started.
Oh.
For me, I know. So getting into that one, dude, I loved it. I thought it's fantastic. But
I need that quick, faster pace, more modern one.
That's
10
the part,
didn't really speak to me.
That's the part that took me out, right? That takes you out of the series. So moving forward with the franchise, you've started to see them kind of get away from that turn-based call to action combat, where it is more real time. While you're in the moment, just go. And we saw that with Clive, and man, I'm telling you, like, it hit on all cylinders for me. It was fantastic to get in there and play more of an action kind of experience for Final Fantasy, which I know if you're, dude, but if you're the old school Final Fantasy fans, like, that's not your playstyle.
No, there's kind of the old school and the new school thought. But this has me thinking as well, one of these quotes, getting the new generation and younger directors working with, new sensibilities and stuff. This kind of reminds me of what Persona kind of is or has become. I'm not such a big fan of Shin Megami Tensei. I'm not familiar with the whole line of games, but Persona is kind of their new hip urban Japan kid kind of version of it. So I wonder if Final Fantasy and Square, they don't want to blend too closely to that.
Well, you gotta be careful. I think there's a fine line, right? How far you can go. You've already gone now into this real-time combat, and I think they pulled in another audience with it, myself included, being a part of that audience, right? DLC Part 1 is dropped, Part 2 is still on the way. Dude, I just haven't had time to get to Part 1, unfortunately. Like, Part 1 dropped near the Game Awards, so we've been swamped here, so I haven't had a chance to get into that stuff. But I want to get back to it. It's definitely on my backlog, which will be getting wrapped up here for that particular game, because my backlog just never ends. Like, it just doesn't stop.
Well, another question. Are we going to be able to get through our backlog before Final Fantasy 17? I imagine 17 is going to be quite a while away.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is a while away, right? But when you get Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth coming out next month, and that's something I need to go back to get Final Fantasy 7 Remake caught up, because it's a continuation. So I need to, again, right? It's that backlog fear of whatever. But going to a younger audience, I think this gives you the ability to then pull in the other audience that you currently don't have. So we'll see. Because, man, you mentioned Final Fantasy to my boys, and like, who cares? Right?
Yeah, no idea.
Not a clue. Not a clue. They're like, oh, what is it? Oh, it's turn-based? I don't play turn-based. I'm not doing that. They're not. The younger audience, dude, doesn't play turn-based games. So moving forward, I think you're going to see Final Fantasy stick with the real-time combat and move that forward. But yeah, when it comes to sensibilities, I wonder what the younger audience or the younger directors would do, what they would take when it comes to Final Fantasy. But it's exciting coming off of 16, man. High hopes to see that they can continue on, because there are moments in that game that, man, like, it was just impactful, to say the least.